welcome back to Murder and Mediumship. It has been a long time, and I am so happy to be back here with all of you. We are giving it a shot on YouTube as well as on the regular Spotify, iTunes, all of those things. Catch short clips of the podcast on TikTok and Instagram as well. So today's episode comes with a trigger warning. Today, we will be talking about violence against children and drug use, okay? Now, this case is about Oakley Carlson and the foster care system in the United States. Now, the foster care system in the US is a mixed bag of stories of successful reunifications of children adopted out of foster care into safe and living homes, and then the horror stories resulting from overworked social workers, a broken system, and a lack of accountability. Children of all ages slipping through the cracks, forgotten and abandoned. In an article published by USA Today between July 1st and 2018 and December 31st, 2020, 74,353 incidents were found during an audit by the Inspector General of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Those incidents were children who went missing from foster care for 2 days or longer. But if you think 2 days or longer is bad, then this story that I have for you today is going to leave your skin crawling. Oakley Carlson was born in December of 2016 to Jordan Bowers and Andrew Carlson of Oakville, Washington. At only 7 months old, Oakley was removed from her parents' custody and placed into foster care. The information as to why Oakley was removed from their custody has never been made public. It's a privacy matter with the Children's Services. So her parents later faced charges of child endangerment after exposing 2 of their children to methamphetamines, and we'll talk about that later. So Oakley was placed into foster care, and I don't think anyone on the receiving end of her was prepared for what would follow with taking her in. Her foster parents, Jamie Jo Hiles, and her husband, Eric, fell absolutely in love with sweet Oakley. Jamie Jo can be seen in multiple interviews talking about her sweet Oakley and how much love and light that little girl brought to everyone she met. I mean, she was only 7 months old when she was placed into foster care. Watching her talk about Oakley is heartbreaking because that little girl was every bit her daughter. Jamie Jo talks about Oakley's favorite book being Brown Bear, What Do You See? Night, Night, Little Pookie, and I Love You, Blanky. My youngest just turned 4, and one of my favorite books to read to my children has been Spooky Pookie. So reading that just kind of tugged at my heartstrings a little bit more. She also affectionately shared how Oakley would always ask for one more book every single night, something I'm sure any parent listening to this can relate to. Sounds like Oakley was a little dancing queen, full of empathy, compassion, and an endless stream of things to say. In October of 2019, though, just before Oakley's 3rd birthday, the Washington State Department of Children, Youth, and Family Services, also known as DCYF, called Jamie Jo and let her know that after over 2 years of Oakley being loved, raised by, cared for, and dependent on them, she was being returned to her biological parents, Jordan Bowers and Andrew Carlson. On November 29th, 2019 at 10 a.m., Oakley was picked up by DCYF and returned to her biological parents. The fact that this even happened was mind-blowing. The Hiles were under the impression that Oakley's biological parents were about to have their rights terminated, and in turn, Jamie Jo and Eric would be able to adopt Oakley outright. During Oakley's stay with her foster parents, she had multiple visits with her bio parents. She came home to Jamie Jo talking about how her parents would be getting into physical fights. Jamie Jo would report these instances to DCYF, but often she felt that she was not being taken seriously by anyone who took the report. They were absolutely devastated by the outcome and sincerely concerned for not just Oakley's well-being, but for her siblings' well-being too. Now, I made a post on my Instagram, if you go look at that, Catherine.Ostrowski, and you can see someone who actively is working for DCYF in Washington who talks about how horrible it is when they report these instances and then nothing seems to be done about them. So in January of 2021, Jamie Jo placed another call to DCYF after hearing from multiple people around town that Oakley wasn't looking well. In photos, she looked like her eyes were black and she just looked unhealthy. Jamie Jo was a high school dance team coach, and she was someone that was known throughout the community. In small towns like this, people really look out for one another, and it sounds to me like the village that it takes to raise the babies is the village that was looking out for Oakley as well. Unfortunately, when Jamie Jo placed that call, the DCYF employee on the receiving end of it actually told her that she could get into trouble for making false allegations. Now, the thing is, though, Jamie, Joe, and Eric weren't the only ones close to Oakley calling the authorities about the welfare of the children. On Christmas Day in 2020, just about a month prior, Oakley had gone to her grandparents' house on her dad's side to celebrate the holiday. Her grandmother was concerned over the dark circles under her grandbaby's eyes, her pale skin, and the scratches or sores that seemed to be all over her face. The grandmother called DCYF and never heard back from them. This, of course, caused massive issues and a divide in the family as well. I don't know this woman, but I have to say that it takes an incredible amount of strength to call and report something against your own child in an effort to take care of another family member. I mean, that's admirable at the very least. And I'm sure plenty will say she could have done more, and maybe she could have. But that's a call I can't imagine was easy for her to make. And then to not have any follow up with them after calling is absolutely horrendous. So we have Grandma calling the authorities in December 2020. Then we have Jamie Joe calling in January 2021. And then Oakley goes missing in February. So that's when authorities begin looking for her, right? No. No one reported her missing in February of 2021. In fact, it sounds like they went on living life as if it were perfectly normal until a house fire in November of that year. So just before 5 p.m. on November 6, 2021, Andrew Carlson calls 911 to report a house fire. Now, Andrew Carlson used to work for the Aberdeen Police Department. He was an officer, but he was terminated from his position after falsifying information to the police, and it seemed that he had a little bit of a drug problem with meth. So Carlson tells the dispatcher that the fire's already out after he and Jordan had fought the flames for absolutely hours, claiming that they got their three kids and puppy out of the house. There should be a fourth child, but couldn't find their phones to call 911 to come put the fire out. He said he didn't need any help, but he was calling just to report that there had been a fire. So according to the original GoFundMe organized on behalf of Jordan Bauer, there are 4 children, not 3. The GoFundMe says that Carlson and Bowers at the time had a 10-year-old boy, 6-year-old girl, 4-year-old girl, and almost 2-year-old little boy who would be needing clothing as well as numerous other things. Carlson told dispatch that his 4-year-old daughter accidentally lit the couch on fire with a lighter. She had taken it and she shouldn't have. However, once the fire was investigated, it was believed that the fire actually started in the microwave, not on the sofa. Again, Jamie Joe calls DCYF with concerns, and her concerns went unanswered. Now, remember how I said Oakley went missing in February 2021? Well, after the fire on November 10th, Jessica Swift, the principal of Oakville Elementary, went to bring supplies to Oakley's family. Swift's daughter happened to be friends with Oakley's 6-year-old sister as well. She didn't see Oakley that day, and when Swift inquired about her, and this is on, I'm sorry, I misspoke. This is on November 10th after the fire, which was on November 6th. So now Jessica's bringing supplies to them on the 10th, okay? So she didn't see Oakley that day, and when Swift inquired about her, the bio parents told her she was just in her room. She stayed for roughly 45 minutes of that day and didn't see Oakley even once. So she went again on November 24th to bring supplies to the family and still saw no sign of Oakley. That time she stayed for only a few minutes. Oakley's sister had a playdate with Jessica's first grader on December 4th, 2021, and Jessica took it upon herself to inquire about Oakley while the girls were playing together. On December 4th, the little girl became really upset when asked about Oakley, stating that Oakley was no more, before turning on her side and visibly shaking. The little girl stayed at Jessica's house that Saturday night and again on Sunday, and Jessica asked the little girl about her sister again. This time, the sister said that Oakley had gone to stay with her other parents. Concerned, Jessica called Jordan Bowers and asked if it would be all right if her daughter stayed one more night and would just bring them both to school in the morning. Of course, Jordan had no problem with it, so she stayed Sunday night as well. After this, Jessica called the police department for a welfare check. Now, the hotel that Oakley's family was staying in was in another part of the county in Tumwater. So Tumwater police arrived at the hotel around 10 a.m. on the 6th. They too saw 0 signs of Oakley at the hotel. And at first, Jordan and Andrew tell the police that they saw Oakley on November 30th, but that they had since lost track of her, which is unfathomable to me to lose track of an entire child, but I digress. Later, Andrew told police that Oakley was staying with his parents, but oddly enough, didn't know his dad's phone number and couldn't remember the address to his father's home. As I mentioned earlier, though, it would eventually come to light that the last confirmed sighting of Oakley was February 10th, 2021. Once police got in touch with Andrew's father, the father says that he hasn't seen Oakley since Christmas of 2020, when Grandma reported Oakley's condition to DCYF. So at that time, they were already concerned about Oakley's general health and well-being, and officers let Andrew know what his father had said. Andrew seemed largely unsurprised and unfazed by the news, despite the fact that he was the one who told police she would be with his father. Jordan Bowers was also extremely uncooperative and refused to answer questions about Oakley at all, going back into her hotel room. After the police left the hotel on the 6th of 2021, it was then that Andrew Carlson called dispatch and reported his daughter Oakley was missing. From the hotel, the officers headed over to the burnt out family home and obtained a search warrant for the place. Upon searching the home, they found various toys and articles of clothing for the other children, but zero clothing and zero toys that belonged to Oakley. They did, however, find what they believed to be blood on the blinds and on the front door of the house, as well as a bloody handprint on the wall in their downstairs hallway. At 3:30 that afternoon, police confirmed that both Andrew and Jordan were seen leaving the hotel with their two-year-old and went back to their home in Oakville. Around 10 after 5 that same day, Jordan Bowers was booked into Grays Harbor County Jail for allegedly obstructing an officer and suspicion of manslaughter. Carlson joined her when he was arrested at 9:30 p.m. on suspicion of manslaughter. They could only be held for 72 hours under suspicion of manslaughter and were not charged, so they would have been released, except that they were held on unrelated charges of child endangerment. The child who wasn't given the medication that they needed. One of Oakley's siblings was not being treated for a disorder or a disease and illness that they had, that the medication was absolutely crucial for her well-being. During an interview, Andrew made comments about Oakley being dead and about her never coming back home. Both of them were arrested for obstruction of justice as well as first-degree murder. Unfortunately, neither could be held for both and were eventually released. Now, things were really moving forward, or so it seemed. So on the 7th, the family property was being searched by local authorities, and on the 8th, the FBI and Washington State Police joined Grays Harbor Sheriff's detectives on the property. They searched nearby properties as well and ultimately covered over 300 acres of land. I can't imagine that during that time of the year, it's always necessarily easy to cover that kind of land, especially in Washington State, I'm saying. But during all of this, on December 9th, both Jordan and Andrew are brought up on charges of abandonment of a dependent person in the second degree for withholding medication from their daughter, for it ended up being 15 months. Like I said, the medication withheld from the little girl was vital for her well-being, and not having it could be potentially fatal. While they're being charged with the abandonment of a dependent person, divers and aircraft are searching their property, still to no avail. Now, by December 13th, 2021, the investigation of the family property was over. Nothing of any real help was found, or at least nothing that the public has been made aware of. I personally feel that they did indeed find something of value, but are waiting to have more information in order to make sure that the charges stick, especially with no physical proof that Oakley's deceased. On December 15th, 2021, nearly 1 year after calling DCYF about Oakley's well-being or lack thereof, Andrew Carlson's parents released a statement to the public. And it read, "The Carlson family have been and continue to be fully cooperating with this investigation. Our only objective is to find our granddaughter Oakley. We're praying that Oakley will be found soon, and also for the multiple of good people working around the clock to make that happen. We ask that the media respect our privacy during this very difficult time, and we do not wish to make any further statement for now. Thank you." So as far as Oakley's concerned, that's really all we know for now. In September of 2023, the King County 4x4 search and rescue was joined by Grays Harbor Sheriff's Department, combing the region for any signs of Oakley. They brought dogs and drones and had 12 people on the scene to be able to physically go to wherever there appeared to be any abnormalities picked up from the drone's perspective, or to investigate anything that the dogs may have been picking up on. Though nothing was found, they do remind us that ruling out any areas of interest is massively important in the investigation. A lot of these areas were not easily searched during the initial winter months, and the changes of season brings new views and new perspectives to the aging investigation. Chief of Special Services Paul Logan of the Grays Harbor Sheriff's Office told the Daily World, "This case will never be over until we locate Oakley Carlson. We continue to investigate the case daily, and we will continue to do so." This year, in February of 2024, more public attention was brought to Oakley's case by an unusual source. Miss Thurston County teen Emma Adams saw a poster in the South Sound about Oakley. Jamie Jo still hangs up posters throughout the area and further from where Oakley was living in order to keep her case in the public eye. Emma Adams noticed one of these posters and had previously been unaware of Oakley's disappearance. Adams is a budding advocate for missing persons, so much so that her service initiative with Miss Thurston County Teen was focused on missing persons and cold cases. This led Miss Thurston County to organize a 5K in Oakley's honor and called it a Pinkathon. At 17 years old, Miss Adams used her platform to highlight Oakley's case and to bring awareness to missing cases in the state of Washington. She was able to raise over $10,000, and the 5K was held on March 16, 2024. Oakley's name is still being said, but truly more national attention and pressure can only help her case moving forward. So, what about Oakley's parents? Like I said, they were released after being detained on suspicion of manslaughter, but were arrested nonetheless for abandonment of a dependent person at the end of December 2021. At the initial hearing, where bond was set at $150,000, Chief Criminal Deputy of Grays Harbor Police Department said that he believed that Carlson and Bowers clearly knew what happened to Oakley, but weren't saying anything. On March 14th of 2022, Andrew Carlson pleaded guilty to 2 counts of endangering a minor under his care with controlled substances and was later sentenced to 12 months in prison. He was also ordered to no longer consume any controlled substances, that is to include marijuana or THC without a prescription. He was to get a chemical dependency evaluation within 45 days of being released and was to follow up with any treatment recommended by the evaluation, as well as provide proof to the court within 6 months of that release. On April 8th of 2022, Jordan Bowers, having earlier maintained her innocence, finally pleaded guilty to 2 counts of endangerment with a controlled substance as well. She did so in exchange for her guilty plea. The abandonment charges were dropped. So she received more than Carlson's 12 months, though, because his record was nearly spotless at the time, while hers was fairly lengthy already. Bowers was sentenced to 20 months in prison, and she was also ordered to have 0 unsupervised contact with non-biological children under the age of 18, and any contact with her children would be decided by the court in dependency matters at a future date. Bowers was arrested as soon as she walked out of the prison gates on January 15th, 2023. So this time she was being charged with 2 counts of identity theft. And what's awesome is I don't know if this was intentional, but I think it's really great that they were able to make sure she wasn't serving any of these sentences consecutively by arresting her as she walked out of prison again, right? So during the investigation into the identity theft, court records showed that Oakley was kept under the stairs, locked in what her sister described as a cell. Her sister told investigators that Oakley started the house fire with her mom's torch and was then beaten for it. According to her, Oakley was under her mom's bed and then in the woods. Bowers attempted to block the release of any of these records, but ultimately the juvenile court allowed the release on an emergent basis of locating Oakley Carlson, who is considered missing and extremely endangered. I'm not sure how this was able to play into the identity theft case or if it just kind of came out at around the same time, but Oakley Carlson was considered extremely endangered. And as if what her sister had said wasn't already enough or off-putting and concerning enough, she went on to tell investigators that she was told by her mother not to talk about Oakley and that Oakley had gone out to the woods and was eaten by wolves. Still, another sibling also spoke to investigators about how Bowers abused Oakley and that Oakley was not safe with their mom. In August of 2023, Bowers was sentenced to another 43 months in prison despite taking a 36-month plea deal. Judge Catherine Svoboda said that Bowers was receiving the top end of the sentencing because she, quote, has not in any meaningful way taken any responsibility. So that merits a sentence at the top of the standard range. It's all the courts can really do. In addition to the 43 months, she also received 12 months of community custody, which sounds to me is basically like having a parole officer being on probation, substance abuse evaluation for substance abuse disorder, follow-up treatment, and no contact with the victims of the identity theft case. The judge believed that Bowers had taken clear advantage of vulnerable people in this case and showed no remorse or desire to take responsibility. And while she punished her to the full extent of the law, Jamie Jo Hiles was very disappointed in the case. She believed that Bowers could have received more time and that she belonged behind bars, even if it's not for what Jamie knows Bowers did to Oakley, especially out of concern for Oakley's siblings. The Oakley Carlson Reward Fund is up to $95,643, and according to Jamie Jo, it's still receiving donations daily, so by the time you hear this, it may be even higher. They've used a portion of this money to sponsor a family each Christmas. Jamie Jo continues to publish a full-page ad in the Olympian on the anniversary of Oakley's last known sighting every year. Unfortunately, the Oakley Carlson Act, House Bill 1937, written by Representative Jim Walsh, failed to make it out of committee before voting deadlines in February of 2023 and has yet to be revived. While the bill was aimed to maintain the safety of children removed from a parent because of abuse, abandonment, or neglect, tightening requirements for foster children removed from those circumstances to be reunited with their parents. However, it seemed that all in all, it was too expensive to support because they already don't have the means to take care of the cases that they have, let alone implement more rigorous restrictions and requirements. Honestly, I could go off. I won't. In February of 2023, Jamie Jo expressed that her daughter was missing and that DCYF failed her. Because of privacy laws, the governor's office and the Department of Children, Youth, and Families won't answer any questions about the case. And while the case is ongoing, there doesn't seem to be much going on. In December of 2023, Ross Hunter, the secretary of DCYF, was interviewed by local investigative journalism show Spotlight. Hunter stood by privacy protections and declined to answer any questions about Oakley's disappearance and DCYF's potential responsibility in any way at all. Melanie, whose last name is unreported, a child and welfare family services social worker with 13 years of experience, walked away from the job because it was, quote, an impossible job and the stress was really high. I mean, she spent more than half of her career as a supervisor, and according to her, the maximum number of cases that were to be assigned to any caseworker at any given time was 18. Most caseworkers were taking on at least 25 cases or more. 18 is state law, state max. They're also supposed to conduct one home visit per month, and the average case lasts about 2 years. They absolutely can't conduct one home visit per month. It just physically doesn't happen. They physically cannot keep up with the work. They're understaffed, overstressed, and severely underfunded. The burnout is frequent, the turnover high, and the workload being so heavy causes many mistakes, which can mean life or death for some kids. Now listen, I'm a psychic medium by trade. That's what I do for my income, and I absolutely love doing it, but I've got to say that I read for social workers, counselors, caseworkers, people like that, nurses who are close to children who are in situations like this, and they all burn out so fast, and they all are also severely undersupported. And the system across the US is so messed up. Some of it's privatized, some of it is taken care of by the government, some of it's kind of like intermeshed between the two, and the whole thing is just an absolute disaster. But at the end of the day, it is an organization that does make money, and unfortunately, I think part of that has to do with why they keep the system underfunded. And beside the point, just one more thing I want to hit on here, and that is that a lot of people believe that it's possible that Oakley was sold by her parents for drugs or for whatever reason. I will say that I don't believe that this is the case. I do believe that Oakley is no longer with us, unfortunately, and that her soul has transitioned to the other side. Who do I think is responsible? Well, I think we all have the same opinion in this case. Physically responsible, I think it was more one party than two, but that two parties are absolutely involved in keeping it a secret. And the DCYF, CPS, whatever you want to call it, is absolutely shares some responsibility, but more in the way that their underfunding can't support them. So I think that they're doing, for the most part, what they can with what they have, but that they need a lot more, even for those who are well-intentioned and hardworking. Carlson fell far from his position as an Aberdeen police officer to meth addict with endangerment and abandonment charges. And I truly hope that they both get the help that they need and turn their lives around. But more importantly, I hope and pray that Oakley siblings are kept safe from all of this. And with that, thanks for listening. Follow, subscribe, like, and share for more.
This whole week surrounding the house for National Purple